Great. So yeah, thanks for joining, guys. And yeah, today is obviously a very special day. Not only is it the Euro final, but it's a SixMed webinar. So yeah, pretty awesome day all around. So what I've got is just an intro poll. So let me just launch that. And this is just for me to kind of gauge where you guys are at with abstract reasoning, which is one of those sections that kind of, I think it polarizes people quite a lot. So when I was doing the UCAT, I personally didn't really mind the section. I found it relatively intuitive. But the thing was on the actual test day, it was quite variable in terms of the actual batch of questions you got. Whereas some people absolutely hate this section and just can't get their sort of head around it. So I'll try and sort of cater to both. So if we have a look, actually there is most people voted, not quite everyone, but there is a bit of a kind of split, which you guys can hopefully see now. So there are a fair few of you who yeah, don't particularly enjoy this section, but then there are quite a few of you who have sort of started your prep, and I'll try and kind of cater for both. So, essentially we're going to go through some kind of general things. I've got an example practice question for each section, which will probably be useful for those of you who, haven't really started your prep. For those of you who have, apologies if the questions are a bit too easy, or if you've seen them before, or whatever. But this is all about kind of starting to build up some ideas, and for me to give you my tips on it as well. In terms of the actual kind of Q&A part, which is obviously the main focus of today. So we have webinar functionality today, which is awesome. So hopefully you can see on the menu, there is a Q&A section. So if you guys put your questions on there, and then you can kind of upvote any questions you want me to answer, and then there'll be kind of dedicated time to go through it. And if you can use the Q&A function rather than the chat function, and kind of leave the chat function for any kind of questions you have about what's going on kind of at the moment. And there's a question from Joaria. Will we get sent the recording? Yes, so the recording and the slides should both be uploaded on the SixMed website. Hopefully later today, if not tomorrow. So yeah, and I believe you can see the previous ones as well. So I've written kind of relatively detailed answers for the example questions, just for those of you who kind of want that. So don't worry about kind of scribbling down what I'm saying as I'm saying it, because you will get access to the recording and the slides for you to go through. So okay, so let's get started then. Okay, so welcome to the SixMed surgery. So those of you who have been to previous ones have seen this slide before, but my name's Hardeep. I'm a Cambridge medical student. I'm just transitioning into my final year, actually. So yeah, that's pretty, that's something. So I'll be kind of, starting my finals revision and that sort of thing. But obviously, I've been through this process. So I went through it quite a while ago now, but since then I've kind of been helping with SixMed and some of my own kind of personal stuff. And I've seen the kind of transition of the UCAT and the BMAT and how they've kind of made changes, and overall just giving you guys more hoops to jump through. You can see my kind of stats there because people kind of always ask about that. So yeah, the UCAT, I did it when it was the UK CAT. And I found it was okay. Back then, the only resources we had really were either super expensive paid ones from places like, well, I probably shouldn't name them, but some of the big names, or it was the sort of book that you can buy, which now I think is a little bit outdated, and obviously it's not an online interface, so it's not as good. But that was about it. So I had to kind of stumble through. Didn't really have the best revision strategy in general for the UCAT. I definitely could have revised more efficiently, but it kind of worked out in the end. And I had Leicester and King's as my kind of UCAT universities. So yeah, if you want to kind of on the Q&A part, ask me any questions about any aspect of the medical application. I've had experience of all three types of medical interviews. If you want to ask me questions on the BMAT, personal statement, what it's like to be a medical student, all of those sorts of things. I'm very happy to kind of answer as best I can. And also, there's plenty of kind of material on the Six Med website, some of which I've kind of done. So I normally signpost people to the personal statement series that I wrote, which is just a good kind of intro if you're sort of starting to think about that. So in terms of today, I'll try to kind of talk through we'll be focusing on the abstract reasoning portion today, but also generally answering your questions on any aspect of the application. And I've got some example questions. Normally I try to make them myself, but I wanted to make sure they were definitely sort of representative of the standard. So I've taken some official ones. So some of you may have seen them before. Apologies if you have, but hopefully most of you won't have. So abstract reasoning, it's one of those sections where, as I said, it tends to kind of polarize people. And I think a good approach for this, and really the sort of best approach, is to find a process, some sort of algorithm that works for you. Apply that then to timed questions, and then essentially it's about doing questions over and over again until it sort of becomes second nature. And that's really the only way you can kind of go about this section. Because it's just about kind of starting to get pattern recognition. Some people will naturally find this section a bit easier, and that's great. But similarly, those of you who find it a bit more difficult, you might have to go in a more structured way about your sort of revision. So apologies for those of you who kind of know this already, but just a kind of breakdown of the sections. And we can see there abstract reasoning. So if you're picturing you're in the exam, you're over the halfway mark. You've got abstract reasoning left, which is the shortest section, and then you've got the SJT after, which is kind of a slightly different section. So in the exam, this will be kind of feeling like you're in the home straight. But the obvious thing is that you have 55 questions in 30 minutes. That's not very much time at all. You don't really have much time to be working things out during this section. It's very much about, sort of recognizing patterns and sort of if you're spending, any longer than kind of 20 seconds on a question, you should already be kind of flagging it, guessing, and then skipping on to the next one. Because some of them can be super difficult and some of them can be really easy. So something to sort of bear in mind there. A kind of summary, sorry for all of the words on this slide. As I said before, you'll get access to the slides and the recording, so don't worry about writing this down. But you can see that works out as less than 15 seconds per question. I mean, it's kind of closer to something like 12 seconds if you're thinking about leaving some time at the end, which is kind of up to you. I personally wouldn't necessarily recommend that for this section, just because there are so many questions. But if you can sort of get down to answering questions that quickly, then that's obviously really good. And you ideally want to get to the stage of pattern recognition, and that comes just with practice, with just doing more questions, doing lots of questions. It can feel quite cumbersome at times, but I think it's worth it for this section, because you'll start to see some really common patterns that come through. And that's stuff that if you end up getting any of the kind of paid resources, whether that's Six Med or other courses, they should hopefully be sort of going through this stuff. So I've got the main question types there. Again, apologies to those of you who kind of already know about this, but just as a kind of recap. So the first type is your standard sort of you'll get two kind of sets. And then you'll get an example square, and you have to say, does it belong to A? Does it belong to B? Or does it belong to neither? And that obviously relies on you kind of knowing what the underlying pattern is. So, general sort of basic tip here, you don't need to look at the answer shape before you've kind of worked out what the pattern is. Type 2 is select the next shape in the series. That's personally my sort of favorite question type. I find those the easiest. That's just about knowing, can you work out the sort of sequence of events that's happening, which tends to be with sort of rotation and alternating colors and patterns and that sort of thing. Type 3 is pick which one completes the statement. So they'll have kind of two example squares, and the difference between them, they'll then be asking you to apply to that. In other words, they've changed A to make it into B. Can you then predict using the same rules if we're going to change C into D, where D is one of the answer options. And then type 4 is which of the four options belongs to set A or set B. So similar to type 1, just a slightly different format. So key things to think about compared to the kind of simplest boxes can help when there are lots of shapes and lots of things going on. I personally find that it's quite useful to look at both sets because if you think about it, it's going to be the same rule for set A as it is for set B. So whether that's, number of sides or, when there's a circle, there's also a shaded square or whatever it might be. And the more kind of boxes you have available to look at, the theoretically the easier it'll be to kind of figure out what the underlying pattern is. But when there are those kind of shapes and kind of sets where you look at it and there's just so much going on, it can be useful to look at the kind of simplest boxes. And then there's normally the acronym SCANS, which is shape, color, arrangement, number, and size. I've also added in symmetry and rotation because I think those are super important as well. This is something that, as I said, if you struggle with this section a bit more, you can literally commit this to memory and kind of go through it in a sequence when you're practicing. And the other thing would be, go through your kind of normal algorithm, go through the most common things. And if you still haven't figured it out, think about which aspects of scans you haven't thought about and then apply them and see if that works. So that's how you can actually then apply that kind of mnemonic. And then in time, pattern recognition will kind of be how you get to the point of answering these questions quickly, which might feel pretty impossible right now. If anyone has any general tips from your kind of revision so far, feel free to pop them in the chat. I know that it can be useful to hear from students who are kind of currently doing it. Although I did do quite a few practice questions in preparation and didn't do too badly, so I hope I at least know what I'm talking about. Okay, so let me get my stopwatch. So what I've got is I've kind of split it into, I'm going to give an example of a type 1 and a type 2 question, and we'll do those first, kind of talk through the answers, go into the Q&A bit, and then we'll do a type 3 and a type 4 question, and then go finish off with the Q&A. So I'll give a little bit more time. So I'll give kind of 30 seconds in general for these two questions. If you want to get like maybe a piece of paper, or if you have a whiteboard near you, something that you can kind of write down and then note down your answers, and then you can kind of answer the poll, and we can see what the sort of spread of answers is, and I can see if the questions are too easy. But if everyone's ready, I'll give maybe a couple of seconds just for you guys to get ready. Okay, and I'll count down from 3. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, and that's it. So that's how much time you'd get sort of on average. Obviously, you might spend a little bit more time if you thought some of them were a bit more difficult, but that's to give you an idea of the kind of level of sort of difficulty if you're kind of right at the beginning and not used to timed questions. Hopefully, those of you who are used to timed questions will have found that not too difficult. So I will just go on to the next poll. And if you guys can note down what answers you got. So A, B, C, A being set A, B being set B, C being neither for the first question type, and the second question type it's just which one of the answer options. If you didn't get time to get an answer, then don't worry about kind of answering. And as I said, you'll get the slides and the recording. So I'll sort of I have the answers written down, but you can spend more time kind of going through it if you need to. So about half of the people have voted. I'll assume the other guys kind of didn't quite get to an answer, which is fair enough. So I'll kind of show you what we got, which is quite interesting. So So question one, people were a little bit conflicted. Most people went for B. And question two, most people went for C. So what I'll do is I'll kind of go to the questions now. So for A, so essentially, you can see starting off the kind of arrangement of the shapes is, clearly not going to be what's sort of being tested here. In other words, you can see that the shapes are all kind of arranged diagonally. So it's not going to be that. So it's going to be something to do with what's actually in the shapes, what's going on with the kind of smaller ones. And so the pattern here is essentially with set A, when there's a sort of black circle, the rotation of the diagonal line will change. So, if it was kind of going top left to bottom right, it'll go top right to bottom left. And also the white circle will move clockwise to the next kind of vertex, as it were. Hopefully that makes sense. Whereas in set B, it's the opposite for the white circle, so it moves anti-clockwise. So the answer here, I believe, was set A. Let me just check that. Yep. So where there's a black circle, the direction of the shapes changes. In set A, the white circle moves 90 degrees in a clockwise direction. In set B, the white circle moves 90 degrees in an anti-clockwise direction. And therefore the answer is A. And you can see with the test shape there, after that black circle, the white circle moves in a clockwise direction. And you can see how they can then ask more questions on this. So there'd be a test shape probably where, there's no change after a black circle, or there's a new shape added, and that will obviously be neither. So, something to kind of bear in mind there. But yeah, so I think about a third of you who answered put set A, so well done to you. Those of you who put set B, don't worry about that. You were maybe thinking along the lines of the black circles being next to each other, or maybe just got muddled up with the sort of clockwise directions, which can happen. So for type 2, I believe the answer was C. Yeah. So essentially what happens is the whole shape rotates 90 degrees clockwise, and the black squares, so that the sort of small black squares, they alternate in color. So remember, this is the kind of sequence one. So it goes from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And you can see quite clearly the sort of outer shape is rotating. And then you can work out from how the shapes are rotating that they're also kind of rotating 90 degrees with it. And then the kind of added difficulty here is that the black squares from one to the next, they will go sort of in kind of opposite colors. So if it was a black square, in the next one it will move and it will turn into a white square, and vice versa. And therefore the answer here is C. So yeah, I think most people got that one right. So yeah, well done for you guys for answering. Again, sorry if you've already seen it, but that's just an example of kind of what sort of questions they can ask. Any questions about those kind of sets or the answers or anything, do pop it in the chat. But as I said, you'll get kind of access to it. So let's switch to the Q&A part now. So I'll set a timer. We may not need the full kind of 10 minutes, depending on how many questions you guys ask. But remember, you can ask about absolutely anything, and if you can put it into the Q&A part, that would be very useful. So yeah, let me see what's there already, and I will set my timer. And I'll give you guys some time just to put your questions down if you have it. So to the people putting the questions in the chat, if you could put it on the Q&A box on the menu, that way I can see people upvoting it and yeah, getting to the sort of top, and therefore I know that most people want to get them answered. Yeah, apologies if I don't get round to answering your question. If that's the case, then you can send the question to team@6med.co.uk and they'll hopefully be able to sort of answer it for you. Okay, so people asking about increasing your speed on these sorts of questions. Yeah, so I kind of threw you in the deep end there for those of you who are, sort of at the beginning. And the main thing I'd say is, it probably feels fairly impossible right now, but if you haven't practiced it, then you haven't got used to seeing the kind of patterns and shapes that are sort of there. So that's kind of the first main thing. With time, you'll start to be able to spot these things quite quickly. And essentially, timed practice is pretty much the best way you can kind of get used to this. So my process is I'll look at what's kind of obviously going on in the sets. Whether it's something obvious about the kind of colors or the shapes or the arrangement. And then I'll start to zoom in and think about what the kind of usual things are. So again, going through that acronym scans, and thinking about if there's anything to do with that. And then with time, you'll start to notice that certain patterns do repeat quite a lot because there's only a finite amount of things that they can sort of do with it. And if you can spot a pattern pretty much straight away in the first 5 seconds, then it shouldn't take you more than another kind of few seconds to work out which one the answer is, and therefore you can start to get these things down in maybe 10 seconds or so, and that will give you more time for the more difficult ones where it might take you a bit longer and you might have to kind of work it out. So, I'd say spend maybe a week or a couple of weeks doing non-timed questions. So just doing them, trying to go through, working out what you think the pattern is. Spend some time doing some research on different kind of types of abstract reasoning questions to, again, get your head around how exactly they can test you. Spend some time familiarizing yourself with the 4 different question types and how they sort of present, and then start to go into your timed practice. And then that's when you'll start to see the most progress. But I think that first initial step of actually getting your head around the concepts is really important as well. So I hope that answered that question. Again, if anyone has any tips, anyone who's actually kind of doing the abstract reasoning prep right now, if you have any tips, feel free to pop them in. How long would you need to prepare? Could you clarify, do you mean by the Ucat, like as a whole, or abstract reasoning, or something else? Can you either pop it in the chat or just add a comment to that, please? Yeah, and I think, so I can see some people asking some more questions about that. So what I'll just do is, so when I'm presented with something like this, my first initial reaction when looking at this is that all of the kind of big shapes are all going in that diagonal line. So it's not going to be anything to do with kind of where they are in the box or anything to do with the shape type or the number of sides. So I'm immediately now starting to look at the details of the smaller shapes. So that's the thought process that I'm going through. And I then look at the smaller shapes and I'm looking kind of at some of the simpler ones. So I wouldn't pick something like the bottom left one on set A. I'd pick maybe the top 2 and compare them and look at what's going on. So you can see with set A, the first 4 shapes are exactly the same. And then there's a black circle and then it changes. So I know that, okay, it must be something to do with the black circle. I then look at specifically what has changed. And from what I can see, the kind of line has switched. And the circle has switched. So it looks like it's kind of rotated. And so then I think, okay, if that's what's going on, let me compare that with the second box and see if that makes sense. So again, the first 3 shapes are the same. We have a black circle and then again it's rotated. So now I think, okay, that looks like that's what's going on. Now I go to set B and see what's kind of going on there. So again, the top left shape, I take a look, the first 3 shapes are exactly the same. Then we have a black circle, and then again, it looks like it's rotated, but this time the other way. And then I compare that to another box in set B, and again, it's exactly the same. So now I've confirmed what I know is going on, and then you can look at the test shape and see which one it kind of corresponds to. So that was my actual thought process with that question. And I've kind of seen similar questions to this before, so it was kind of biased by the fact that I've started to build up a bit more of that pattern recognition, but that was my kind of exact thought process. And then with this one, again, instantly, what's the most obvious thing here? Well, the big black outer shape, is kind of rotating here. So it's not going to be anything to do with the shape changing. It looks like it's rotating. The other thing I'll do with a question like this is, because you can see the outer shape is kind of rotating around, or the same as it alternating. So it's horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. I'll then go and look at the answer options and see if any of them show it as being vertical, which would obviously be incorrect. And if any of them did, then I could automatically discard that one as an option. So if you were stuck for time, then you can kind of discard that and have a better chance of guessing. And then once I've kind of seen what's happening with the outer shape, I'll then have a look, okay, what's happening with the inner shape. So I just quickly in my head go circle, circle, square, square, and then what's happening on the next one. So that's going kind of from the bottom around. And the next one is square, circle, circle, square. So it seems like they've rotated. And I think, okay, has that happened next time? Yes. Has it happened on the next time? Yes. Okay, so they rotate. But then something seems to be changing with the colors. So then I'll work out what's happening with the colors. And then you have the kind of sequence down. So then what you'd want to do is, instead of looking at the answer options, when it's a sequence one, you want to work out what is the next one in the sequence going to be, and then quickly scan the options and see which one that matches to. And then that's kind of my approach with that one. So I hope that was useful, because that's my sort of thought process when going through them. Okay, we have a lot of questions here. Okay, so asking about the Ucat preparation. So this question is asked quite a lot, and I think ultimately there isn't a set number of kind of weeks. Anything over than sort of 3 or 4 weeks, I think is ideal. That's going right from the beginning of not really knowing anything all the way to being test ready. So if you kind of sat the Ucat before, or you've been to kind of courses and some of the basics, you might not need quite as long. But I'd say, ideally sort of 5 or 6 weeks. And you essentially want to break this up into, the first couple of weeks, familiarizing yourself with the different sections, the different question types, how exactly they're going to ask you the questions, the timing, what kind of pre-existing information you might need to know. So, something like quantitative reasoning, you'll need to know your sort of ratios and percentages and decimals and that sort of thing. And then the next few weeks after that, starting to do practice questions, adding in some sort of timed practice questions, things like Ucat Ninja or whatever kind of platform you want to use. And then the few weeks after that, starting to do kind of longer timed sections. So maybe, you'll do kind of a longer period of questions. Maybe you'll do a whole section. Maybe you'll do a couple of sections back to back. And then ideally you want to do some full mocks as well. Because remember, doing things section by section, having a break in the middle is very different to doing everything back to back in a 2-hour block, which is what you'll actually be doing. So yeah, I'd say, splitting that up into kind of a few weeks for each bit, something like kind of 5 or 6 weeks is probably the best approach. But, some people say they can do it in kind of 2 weeks. I think that's just needless stress. And, some people will take kind of months and months to do it, which I think would only be advisable if you're kind of, only spending maybe a few hours a week doing it, because I think you can quite quickly burn out with kind of Ucat stuff, because it's just quite frantic paced. So hopefully that is useful. So yeah, I mean, pretty much if you haven't started by now, I think is probably a good idea. But if you're here, then you've technically started your revisions. That's good. Okay, so we've got a question about kind of gap year and reapplying. I think gap years are really valuable. I actually took one during my medical course, and it was amazing. But in terms of kind of building up your sort of CV, as it were, your kind of application, I think maybe take a look at what's missing from your application. Is it something like work experience? Is it things like on a more kind of academic slant? So, sort of projects. Do you think that you could maybe demonstrate some skills a bit more? And then, there's kind of that side of things to actually build up the sort of skills. And then on the side, I'd recommend kind of pursuing some sort of interest. So, something kind of related to medicine, whether that's writing or some sort of society or something like that, to kind of show your kind of dedication to it over a long period of time. Because if you can do something over 6 months or 9 months, or your whole kind of gap year, then that will demonstrate, you're sort of committed to it over a long period of time, rather than kind of, doing 3 days worth of work experience, which has its own value, but it's not necessarily demonstrating that you're committed to it over a longer period of time. Then I would definitely sort of do things for yourself. So do things to get yourself in a better place, get some kind of self-development. And I think the combination of those three is going to ensure not only is your application stronger, but also you as a sort of person and as an applicant are also stronger as well. I think there are some really good resources out there for kind of people reapplying for medicine. And I think there's a bit of information on the 6med website, but it's maybe something we need to increase a little bit. So yeah, I would probably recommend doing that. So hopefully that's a good answer for that. How do you spot the patterns faster? Are there any techniques you use? So like I said, my normal technique is spot kind of what's obviously going on, and then look at the more kind of common things. So things like the types of shape, the number of shapes, curved versus straight lines, odd versus even, patterned versus not non-patterned. And if I kind of go through that very quickly and I haven't figured it out, if I think I'm nearly there, I'll maybe kind of have a think about other things in the sort of SCANS acronym, and see if anything else falls out. Otherwise, if I haven't got it by then, I'll normally just kind of guess and then move on. Which is something you can do a decent amount with this section, because there are so many questions, and also quite a lot of people find it quite difficult. I think the average for this is something like 610 around there, so it's not super high. So yeah, I would say probably that. So spot the obvious, go through the common things that they ask, and then go through kind of the rest of the things in the acronym. And then as you do more questions, you'll start to see what the common things are. And also you'll start to kind of remember, oh, I did that question and I couldn't figure it out. And I looked at the answer and it was about kind of rotation with a black circle or whatever it is. So maybe it's a similar thing for this. And then you can actually kind of help to pick up things that way as well. So yeah, and again, Mark, as I said, things might seem very difficult right now, but the more familiar you get with it, the easier the timing gets, because no one that the day before the UCAT exam feels the same about abstract reasoning as the kind of beginning period. So everyone I think gets at least a little bit better at it. And if all else fails, just get 900 on the other sections. Easy as that. Okay, so I think we've gone a bit over that time, so I will get around to answering more questions afterwards, but we'll just go through the next kind of group of practice questions. Whoops, I didn't put a warning slide in there. So again, if you guys could get something ready, like a whiteboard or a piece of paper, note down your answers. I'm going to do the same thing again. This time we'll have a type 3 and a type 4 question, and then again we'll go through the answers afterwards. What I think I'll do with this is I think I'll give a little bit more time, so I'll actually give 40 seconds for this, so 20 seconds each, just to kind of allow a little bit more time. Maybe you'll be able to get a question that you ordinarily wouldn't have, and therefore kind of build up your confidence a little bit. So I'll kind of do that. So if everyone is ready, I will start that in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that was 40 seconds. So that was a bit more time than you'd kind of ordinarily get. So let me, oh, sorry, I keep forgetting to stop sharing the results. Sorry if that's kind of popping up and annoying you guys. But if you could answer this poll, hopefully you've got some answers. Again, if you don't have any answers, then feel free to just kind of leave it. But yeah, and okay, this is quite interesting. I'll just give a bit more time for people to vote. Got about half of the people have voted. Give just a few more seconds. Okay, so let me show you. We've yeah, pretty variable here. And we've got B as the top answer for the first question and A as the top answer for the second question. You can see very variable. So, you know, that's hopefully going to be of some comfort for those of you who unfortunately haven't got it right. But let's kind of take a look at it. So again, I'll talk you through my sort of thought process here. So with this type of question, you're comparing the top two boxes. I don't like the way they format it. That's the actual way you'll see it on your exam. I don't think it's particularly clear. I think they need to separate the boxes a bit more. But essentially what we're looking at is what's happened from the top left box to the top right box. And then you're using that exact same rule and you're applying it to the bottom left box to come up with the answer. So again, obvious things, I look and immediately the arrows are pointing in a different direction. So, okay, what's going on with the arrows? So it looks like they're the opposite. So, you know, again, what you could even do automatically is look at the answer option and see if there's one where the arrows aren't the opposite. So, you know, if we look at the bottom left shape, using that same rule, it should be up, left, and down. And so we take a look, and unfortunately, all of them do show that. But if one of them didn't, we can kind of discard that as an answer. We then look at what's going on with the kind of middle shape. So we've got a square on the outside and a triangle in the middle. And then we have a triangle on the outside, a square in the middle, and then a tiny triangle right in the middle. So, okay, it looks like they've kind of flipped the shapes here. So whatever's in the middle on the first shape then goes to the outside, and also the innermost shape. Hopefully that makes sense. So if a triangle is in the square, then when they've changed it, the triangle goes outside, the square goes inside, and then there's a small triangle as the innermost shape as well. But that innermost shape is different. It's upside down and it's now black. So we then, now that we've kind of worked out what the rule is, we'll apply it to that shape. So again, the arrows need to point in the opposite directions. So when we're looking at the bottom left shape, they should be pointing up, left, and down. And then we've got a circle on the outside. So that circle is now going to be on the inside. We're going to have now a trapezium sort of on the outside, and it's the same shape, so it's black colored. But then we're also going to have a small upside down trapezium, which is now not colored on the inside. So just to confirm, the answer there is B. So I think most people got that right. Can I still see that? Yeah, most people got that right. And then for this one, so again, the obvious thing when looking at it, it's so to me, this actually kind of looks, especially looking at top left, it kind of looks a little bit like a pedigree diagram, which is something I'm learning for my finals. Still need to know about that. So immediately I'm thinking, okay, where are the kind of branch points here? And so again, taking a look at the top two shapes, it looks like they branch at certain points. And so I'm looking, okay, where do they branch? Okay, it looks like it might be after a white circle, looking at the top left. And then I look at the top right picture of set A. And again, it's branched after the white circle. And then I might compare it to the ones below as well, just to check. We then go over to set B and we think, okay, it's something to do with the specific shape where the branch point occurs. And in set B, you can see straight away that this is a gray circle. So when the answer option says which of the following belongs in set A, we're looking for the one that branches after a white circle. And you can see there A is the only one that kind of branches after that. So A is the answer. Someone saying, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. When is the next Q&A session in this webinar. So it's just after this. So just when I explain this. Then Ab's saying, does the grey circle branch only once, but the white circle branches twice in set A? Yeah. So I mean that's another way to kind of look at it. But I mean the grey circle branching once is just the kind of equivalent of it continuing. So it's kind of the same idea to me. So yeah, and therefore A is the answer here. So I've written the kind of description of the answers here, which again you can see, when you kind of go through the slides later on. Set A middle left, is that a distraction? Yeah, exactly. So set A middle left, that's actually to demonstrate that the rule works, because there is no white circle and therefore there's no branch point. So that's actually showing you that rule kind of works. So yeah. Okay, so on to the Q&A bit. So how are we doing for time? We're doing pretty good for time. So I'm going to give maybe 10 minutes to go through this. So again, if you want to put your questions down, we've got quite a few on kind of 6 upvotes. So if anyone can act as a tiebreaker there, that would be really good. And yeah, again, it can be about absolutely anything. Doesn't have to be about abstract reasoning, but obviously I can see why that would be kind of on your minds. And again, sorry to those of you who maybe found those questions quite easy, but I have to sort of cater for a wide range of people, and hopefully it was just a good refresher for you, good bit of a confidence boost. And yeah, so let me start this. Okay, so we've got one. What's a common okay. Well, I started that one. What's a common mistake students always make and so should avoid doing, be it doing the question or as preparation for UCAT? Okay, so I think the biggest mistake people make in terms of preparation is just kind of blunt forcing the questions and not actually learning from them. So just kind of doing questions passively and not understanding what's going on in terms of the underlying sort of thought processes, because that's essentially how you're going to learn. You're going to learn by establishing how you actually need to think in the exam. And this goes for all of the sections. If you're doing questions and then you kind of come to one, you don't really have any idea what's going on. You kind of guess an answer and then get it wrong, and you look at the explanation and you think, oh yeah, the explanation kind of makes sense. I'd get that in the exam, and then move on. That's probably not the best way to go about it. I think that would be a point for you to think about what your thought process was and then compare it to what the thought process should have been to get the right answer. And that's how you're kind of going to learn. I also think people tend to rush the kind of first bit of preparation, which is when you actually understand what all of the sections are and what the sort of subtypes of the questions are. I think one of the main reasons for that is there aren't too many resources that actually teach you about that. But it's something I've tried to do in these webinars. So if you want to go back on the slides and literally just kind of, recap or have a quick look at the different question types. I go through them in a lot more detail on the masterclass video series, but I know not everyone has, 60 odd pounds for that. And then I think in terms of the actual question, I think there are people at opposite ends of the spectrum. So some people will just worry about the time constantly and not actually allow themselves to think about the question. And then there'll be some people who kind of ignore the time and probably because you're all very intelligent people, you're applying for medicine, you're used to getting to the right answer. And sometimes in the UCAT, you won't get to the right answer. A question will just take too long and you're going to have to guess it and kind of skip and move on. And I think getting that balance right is really important, because ultimately, think about something like the abstract reasoning. There are 55 questions. If you end up not being able to answer, 8 or 9 of them because, you ran out of time, that's going to be, a lot worse than if you ended up kind of guessing and skipping 5 of them. And, maybe you'll get, 1 or 2 of them correct. So it's always better to kind of do that and focus on getting to the end of the section rather than, trying to answer every question. And that was something that I struggled with as a student as well. So I'd say in kind of general mistakes, those are probably the main ones students make. And, the best way to avoid that is to give yourself enough time to go through it systematically and also get lots of practice in with a question bank. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. Helia. Okay, what percent do you need to get a good score in abstract reasoning or overall? I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, because I think not only does it change slightly, but it's slightly different in terms of when you do it on question banks compared to the actual exam. I think there are some websites that can give you kind of adjusted scores, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure. If anyone knows, feel free to pop that in the chat or comment on that question. I'll actually leave it up so anyone can put that. Okay, what aspect of the MMI did you find the most difficult? I think the difficulty with the MMI is you'll go from one station, which can be talking, about kind of statistics or, something to do with your personal statement or something like that, and then you have to completely switch and think about something else, which is obviously quite difficult, especially when you have things like simulated patients and you're talking to them. It can be quite a sad scenario, and you're meant to sort of talk through them and talk with them through a difficult process, and then straight away you have to switch and start answering questions on what your biggest strength is. That can be quite difficult. I think also because it's one of those things that tests a wide variety of skills. If you're someone who's really good at some things and not that good at others, then it can be quite disheartening to have kind of entire stations where you feel like you're not doing that well. But overall, I actually really enjoyed the MMI station. I think it actually suited my kind of idiosyncrasies a bit better. My Cambridge interviews were awful, but I guess I ended up getting a place anyway. So yeah, there is hope. Okay. So how long did you do your revision for, and how many questions approximately? Okay, so like I said, my revision for the UCAT wasn't particularly good. How long should you revise? I've kind of mentioned before, it should be kind of at least 4 weeks of structured revision. People always ask, how many hours per day? I think that's a question you shouldn't really give a blanket statement to, because I think it depends on how you work individually. But as long as you're kind of regularly doing work, so you might have bursts, you might have a few days where you're working, quite a few hours, and some days where you barely do anything. As long as you're being, quite consistent with it across the week, then I think that's probably a good approach. In terms of how many questions, to be honest, I think there's more than enough on something like sort of UCAT Ninja. I know that they brought some stats out recently which showed that actually most students don't even answer all of the questions. So there are kind of plenty there. I think as long as you're getting to the point where things are starting to become second nature, that's essentially where you need to get to. And some people would get sooner. So I can't give a kind of approximate question number, but I'd say you at least want to go through as many questions as are going to be in the section as an absolute minimum. Kind of every sort of few weeks, ideally a lot more than that. And yeah, once things start to become second nature, so you're realizing that you're clicking things very confidently, and you're starting to see patterns. If it's something like abstract reasoning, then that's kind of the point you want to get to. So if you're not there yet, then you probably need to step up the number of questions you're doing. So yeah, that's my very diplomatic answer. I'm sorry I can't give specifics for this, but if I go in ahead and say you should do 25 questions per day, and then sort of someone doesn't score that well, then it's kind of my bad advice that has sort of led to that. So yeah, thank you for the question, Jason. Considering that you get your BMAT scores after you send in college applications, how do you decide your uni list? Sorry, the chat's just popped up. Anna Sophie, if you could pop that on the Q&A, and I'll hopefully get round to it. If not, send it to team@sixmed.co.uk. I just have to prioritize the ones on the Q&A. Sorry about that. Okay. And then there's a comment on this one. Considering that you get your BMAT scores after you send in college applications, how do you decide your uni list? So I think it's quite difficult, because you do sort of have to, almost sort of make a commitment, which I think is sort of good because that means that if you have to score well on the BMAT because you've selected one or two or maybe even more BMAT universities, then you sort of have to commit to it. So I think people, it's a similar question to should I do both UCAT and BMAT. I think you need to spend some time looking at both tests and looking at what's actually tested in the BMAT. You also need to think about where you want to go ideally, and why you want to go there. Because if you really do want to go to Oxbridge, or you really want to go to UCL, or one of the BMAT universities, there's nothing wrong with putting it down and committing to studying the BMAT. It just depends on whether or not you think you can kind of juggle both of them, and how well you think you're going to do on the BMAT. The thing I would say is, you can also kind of strategically apply to places that use the BMAT in a different way. So somewhere like Cambridge obviously uses the BMAT together with everything else. So if you're less confident about the BMAT, that would be a better option if you're thinking about Oxbridge compared to somewhere like Oxford, who directly use your BMAT score when they're kind of arranging students in a sort of list. So yeah, I'd probably say those are the main factors. So think about your confidence for the BMAT, think about specifically where you want to go, and think about kind of how well you could juggle doing both exams, any commitments you have, and then if you decide no, I do want to go to a BMAT university, at least one, then stick with it, make that commitment, and then you'll just have to kind of hope that your BMAT score is decent, and I'm sure it will be. So hopefully that answers that. How did I prepare for my interviews, and how long did I spend preparing for each one? So again, my preparation wasn't particularly good. My school was just a normal sixth form. We only got one mock interview for medicine, and it wasn't a particularly good one. It was basically just some guy who I think was something to do with biology, and he just fired a load of questions at me. So that was in terms of my kind of school's preparation. I did a little bit of kind of reading up. I looked at some kind of online videos. I think at the time Cambridge had like a super old medicine interview example, which I kind of looked at, and then just kind of made sure I knew everything that I'd put in my personal statement. And yeah, just try to familiarize myself with exactly what the format's going to be. And I kind of went from there. So there really wasn't the best approach. I think if you can get your school to get you some mocks, if you can kind of familiarize yourself with what the format's going to be, think about what skills you're going to have to demonstrate, make sure you're comfortable talking about anything you've put in your personal statement, and then obviously there are specifics for different styles of interviews. Also, if anyone wants to see an example of a Cambridge medicine interview being done by an actual interviewer, there are some medics in the year above me. Well, they're now a couple of years above, but they filmed one a few years ago. Let me just put it on the chat. The channel is called Asclepium. I think it now might be called Q&J. And they were actually medics at Peterhouse in Cambridge when they filmed that video. And the person doing the interview is actually my director of studies, who does the Cambridge medicine interviews. And the students who are being interviewed were actually, I think, first years at the time. So that's really quite representative. So yeah, I'd kind of recommend that. Sorry, that just came to my mind. So yeah, I think ideally you want to spend a decent amount of time preparing, and it kind of depends on what your strengths are as well. If you think the actual kind of softer skills of the interview, so the kind of communication aspect is something you might struggle with, it's probably a good idea to practice that. So either with teachers or with friends, or if you can get some mock interviews, you can get some tutoring if you have the money. Then that'll be really useful to kind of actually practice that kind of format, and then familiarize yourself with it. In truth, that's I could give a very, very detailed answer to that question. So that's kind of my abridged version. Okay. Someone said on common mistakes. I don't see a question on common mistakes on there. I see a question on getting a good score, and I kind of answered that saying I I think I answered the question on common. Or did you put that before? Was that from before? Oh yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. So I did answer that. Sorry, I got really confused then. No, hopefully you, yeah, I did answer that before. Sorry, I felt really bad then. Okay, I think I've actually gone a little bit over time. I wanted to leave a few minutes left to kind of sort some things out afterwards with the kind of cloud stuff here. So I hope this has been useful. Again, sorry to those of you who maybe found the questions a bit too easy. Hopefully you guys found the questions quite useful and the Q&A quite useful. I try and always give kind of honest answers and signpost you to kind of where you can find out more information if I can't answer something. But yeah, the next webinar is going to be, I think, in exactly 2 weeks' time, and that's going to be on the SJT section. So that'll be a good one. I think that's generally a section that's not very well taught, so that could be a good one to come to. But yeah, thank you so much for kind of coming, guys, and I will hopefully see you on the next one. And let's hope England win today. And yeah, sorry to any Italians who are there. But let me stop sharing and I will see you guys later.